Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Here I'm going to start my presentation today. First, I would like to express my gratitude to AGI and Fudan University for organizing this wonderful forum. I appreciate very much for the opportunity to participate in it. Also, I want to give my thanks to the previous speakers for the informative and enlightening presentation. To be honest, I started to prepare for this English paper and presentation just 2 weeks ago when I received the information about this forum. So I only made up to finish a very brief PPT, but I have a relatively complete speech draft. I will try to make my point clear with that. And the topic of my paper is the verification and optimizing suggestions on land requisition tract development policy, Collage city, evidence from Foshan city in China. This is a policy I have been following for the last year. My colleagues and I also conducted some practical projects. That's why I'm so interested in this policy. And today I would like to share it with you. The presentation will be divided into 5 parts. In China, the first part is a brief introduction of the land policies we talked about today. In China, there are 2 types of land ownership, the state-owned land and the collective-owned land, which means 国有和 and 集体所有. Land use right can be only belong to land use right can belong to individuals, but the ownership can only be in the above mentioned 2 types. A collective owned land means it is owned by farmers. In the Land Management Law 1987, it is regulated that land in urban area belongs to the whole people, which means the ownership of urban land is state-owned. This is in line with Article 10 of the 1982 Constitution of China, which also says land in urban area belongs to the state. Why did China formulate such constitutional norms? There is an explanation represented by Zhou Qiren, a well-known Chinese economist. At 1980s, China is in the early stage of reform and opening up. The main focus of the country at that time was to promote industrialization and economic growth as fast as possible. The cities need a large amount of land at that time, but the collective ownership cannot support the demand sufficiently and effectively enough. After the 1987 Land Management Law came into effect, the collective owned land in the urban area needs to be requisitioned when turning from farmland to construction land. It is the first time that land requisition is officially written in the law. Before that, it is written in some policy documents, but from 1982 and 1982 Constitution and 1987 Land Management Law, it is the first time officially written in the law. So the farmland can officially enter the land market only after being requisitioned by the government. Of course, the government will also provide roads, tap water, electricity, and other infrastructures before sells the land to real estate developers. Since then, in topics such as how to regulate the administrative approval procedures, how to protect farmers' rights and interests have now been a focus point of academia and practitioners. And reducing the scope of land requisition is one of the most important reform direction. But how to reduce it? As a matter of fact, both 1982 Constitution and 1987 Land Management Law stipulate that the state may requisition collective owned land for the needs of the public interests. And the procedures should be in accordance with the law. The 2020 land management law furtherly tightened restrictions on land requisition conditions. Meanwhile, it gives the fifth case of land requisition, which is the tract development of urban construction. Then what is land tract development? Literally, we can say it means the development should happen in the urban area, and the land area should be in a certain scale, cannot be too small. The main purpose was to avoid the land development to be too dispersed. Implicitly, this policy is aimed at regulating land developed for profitable use, such as residential, commercial, or industry use. The Ministry of Natural Resource of China has set standards for the land requisition tract development. Let's look at the four most important ones. First, it says the tract development area should be in centralized construction area of the urban development boundary in the land and space planning, which is equivalent to the master plan in China. Second, it requires in the tract development area, the land for public welfare use should be no less than 40%. Third, the plan of tract development should ask opinions from villagers. Here, they need to get consent from 2/3 of the villagers. And they should ask opinions from the experts from related research fields like land management, urban planning, law, environment, and so on. And they should also ask opinions from deputies of the district, the People's Congress, and the members. The fourth requirement is that the requisition projects should be completed as planned. If a district has not completed its plan for 2 years continually, it shall not submit a new plan. In the second part, I would like to share you a review of two important debates regarding land requisition tract development. First, the first debate is about the necessity of land requisition in the city. In case of collective owned land, the decision regarding how to develop it is made by village collective economic organizations. Actually, in Foshan and in most villages in developed areas in China, they have found up economic organizations in each village. Along with the rapid urbanization in developed areas in China, collective owned land has been entering urban land market informally for a long time. But in most cases, these lands are used in very inefficient and fragmented way. That's because under the decision-making mechanism of village collectives, they tend to focus on short-term interests, and they don't like any kinds of risks. Taking Foshan as an example, although there are elites in the board of directors of village collective economic organization who are capable of making investing decisions and who knows how to make more efficient use of collective owned land. But they need to listen to the voices of their villagers, since their positions depend on the villagers' votes. And in reality, most villagers hold a very negative attitude towards investment risks. They resist in reinvesting in the form of collective assets. Instead, they prefer to rent land to factory owners and divide the income annually, but steadily. Even if the money is much less than developed area, than developed after well invested. So the village collectives can hardly implement long-term development planning or carry out development with large investments. As a result, in the highly urbanized city of Foshan, where the urbanization rate is above 95%, a large amount of the construction land is collective owned, and the output of this kind of land is very inefficient. Like in Nanhai, the biggest district of Foshan's 5 administrative districts, the share of collective owned land in all construction land is over half, over 50%. However, the average GDP of collective owned construction land can only reach 18% of the state-owned land, and in the average land output of tax revenue, the same rate is only 24%. In order to make an efficient use of limited land resources in urban areas, and land requisition is very necessary. That's the first reason. And as to the second reason, it is a necessary means to solve the problems of market failure. In economics, it is agreed that market failure usually showing negative external phenomena and a lack of public goods due to free-riding economic activities. And this kind of market failure is also noteworthy in the land development market. In urbanized areas, due to the agglomeration of population and the complex of urban functions, it is impossible to operate independently like in the urban area. And it is also impossible for separate landowners to voluntarily provide public goods such as roads, pipelines, airports, or schools. Therefore, it is inevitable for the government to provide services through land requisition. Also, it is showing that the practice of urbanization in various countries has testified that the freer farmland access the market, the worse the city's quality of urbanization gets. There will be housing with incomplete property rights, illegal buildings, slums, and so on. Conversely, the more stringent where the government controls the farmland converting to non-farmland, the higher quality of urbanization the city can get. And the economy there is usually more developed. The above discussion is mainly about the necessity of land requisition. And the second debate is about the legitimacy of tract development. We already know that according to Chinese law, the premise of legal land requisition is for the needs of public interests. As a type of public interests rating in the land management law, tract development has aroused different views. There are mainly three typical views. First, a group of scholars think that the land developed for profitable use and public welfare facilities are completely two different things. Their relationships is not that one containing the other. Even the land developed for profitable use is in urban centralized construction area. It should not be included in the requisition under the name of tract development. Those who hold this view believe that the opportunity for farmers to share development rights and interests in the process of land value increasement will still be obstacled or infringed due to the existence of tract development. The second view is that if the government set reasonable standards to tract development, it can be considered as a type of public interest. But as to how to measure it, they suggest if the land requisition and the subsequent land development activities can improve public affairs to a certain level, the tract development in the requisition case can be counted as representing public interests. For example, in individual projects, in industrial projects, only big industrial projects approved by the government site or above the provincial level should be requisitioned for land development, while smaller industrial projects cannot. The third view supports that all kinds of land requisition have taken the responsibility of public welfares, including the profitable land use. The scholars believe that under the land financing system in China, the money the government get from selling the land provides a huge amount of capital for local governments to conduct public affairs. Even in the case of profitable land for residential or commercial use, its income is used to build roads, build schools or hospitals. Therefore, the profitable land has actually undertaken the responsibility and meets the public interests. In other words, it means that all kinds of land requisition represents the public interests, and there is no need to distinguish profitable or non-profitable use. That justifies the legitimacy of land requisition tract development. So, but in practical, in the third part, we look at the practices in Guangdong province and Foshan city. First, we look into we need to be aware of the two kinds of spatial areas in this discussion: the area of land to be requisitioned and the area of tract development. The Guangdong province has based on the standards of Ministry of Natural Resources of China, and the province has added some conditions on the area of tract development. The first, it needs we can look at the 60%. It means the proportion of land area to be requisitioned should be over 60% when comparing to the area of land tract development. And it says the different areas of land tract development, which is the red line on the screen, shall not be overlapping. And the city can only make a plan of tract development once a year. we look at, let's look at the Foshan city. It's in the southern China, in the middle of the Guangdong province. Here in Foshan, it's quite unique in China because the villagers has been enjoying a dividend from their land release contract for many years due to the endowment effect. Even the land value is much lower in the informal land market, and the dividend is very low. The villagers still are more inclined to maintain the status quo rather than accept the compensation from land requisition. In many cases, urban development projects are dispersed because they are carried out in one scope of a small village. This makes it very difficult for government to provide urban public facilities and develop modern industry. Eventually, it results in a high fragmented collage state when high and low quality areas highly mixed. We look at the tract development plans in 2021. And we can see the policy has caused the following problems. First, the policy will lead to more fragmented urban areas being joined. According to convention understanding, urban areas with one or more blocks should be developed as a whole. But in Foshan, currently the collective owned and state-owned land are nested with each other, like we can see on this screen. So constrained by the proportion we mentioned, the 60%, the connective land left to be not requisitioned is often corner parts. Constrained by the 60% terms, corner plots to be requisitioned usually have to be joined as a multiple fragmented tract development districts. As a result, in Foshan's 2021 tract development plan, there are 37 districts with less than 1 hectare, and the smallest district is only 74 square meters. For the requirements of 40% of public welfare land, how to measure it is the idea of method of how to measure it is still not clear. The proportion of 60% means the area of tract development should not be bigger than 1.65 times of the land to be requisitioned. For a fragmented corner plots, when meeting the requirements of no more than 1.67 times and 40% public welfare land at the same time, the tract development area drawn out will be of no means in reality. In this paper, we think that the responsibility of public welfare land should focus on the role of government in solving the negative external phenomena and reduce the free riding. Accordingly, public welfare facilities should also be shared by plots within a certain service range, and rather than allocated to individual corner plots. And the third problem is the policy requires to promote the land requisition plan of all plots in the tract development area at one time. But like we said before, the negotiation with the villagers will take time, and the result is impossible to predict. The policy requires that the area shall not overlap, and it is equivalent to requiring the local government to make all the land requisition plan of all the plots at one time. It is also impossible to implement in reality. As our suggestions to make these policies more reasonable. First, we suggest to consider the tract development area in the scale of daily life circle. First, the boundary of tract development area should be in combination with the unit of regulatory planning, which contains one or several blocks. Because in regulatory planning, there is detailed requirements of how many, which kinds, and service radius of public welfare facilities should be provided. Second, the suggestion is the land area to be requisitioned should be over 60%, and this term shall be cancelled. The policy should encourage the surrounding plots to absorb the corner plots to develop as a whole, so as to achieve the purpose of integration. Third suggestion is that we should cancel the restriction that the tract development area cannot be overlapped. It should be allowed that land requisition should be conducted after the negotiation is fully completed. And when one negotiation is finished, the policy should allow them to be submit the administrative approval procedures and get the compensation in time. As to our conclusion, we can see, to sum up, due to the limitations of the traditional requisition mode of collective owned land, it cannot meet the requirements of urban high efficiency and high quality development. It has been considered as a necessary means to promote the development of industrialization and urbanization while implementing the policy of the tract development tract development. However, when coming to province level, the governors are formulating policies according to their own understandings of the law. In Guangdong, it is obvious they added many unreasonable and unrealistic restrictions. In this regard, in the context of practical experience in Foshan, this paper gives the suggestions on how to adjust the policies in the city where the collectives are collectives have a high alternative. The tract development policy is still very new in China. It requires more practical and theoretical research to be improved. And that's all for my talk today. Welcome all of your comments and suggestions. Thank you.
So let me ask the first question to Dr. Peng. As we know, during the rapid process of urbanization, particularly in China, many major cities actually are merged from one core city and many surrounding counties or towns. Mm-hmm. So not only in Foshan, we know Foshan is a very big city, and we can also find many other cities in China. They should face the quite similar phenomena because they are merged into one from, as I said just now, one core city and many other towns, other surrounding counties. So they, all of the city are facing the similar problem. That's how to conduct the land requisition for the so-called tract development, 成片开发. So my question is that in Guangdong province, maybe some of our participants don't know, Guangdong province is the number one economic province in China, who has the largest, ranked the first in China at the province level. So in Guangdong province, there are many big cities such as Shenzhen and Guangzhou. So my question is that compared to Shenzhen and Guangzhou, is Foshan face the more complicated situation?
Actually, the Guangdong province, the situation is most complicated in Guangdong province. It's comparing to other provinces in China, but inside Guangdong is for some the most complicated. My answer is also it's a little bit more complicated. First, I would like to explain why Guangdong province is more complicated than other provinces. Because in Guangdong, when the urbanization process, the villages have been experiencing offering land to factories and lend their land to the industrial owners without going through the legal process, and they all have got money from this illegally but largely existed procedure, and the villagers have been used to getting money from their land released to the industrial use, and so when government came to requisition their land, they will usually refused to. They will usually refuse, and the situation is much different in other provinces, especially in the inland provinces, because the industrialization and urbanization is not as developed in Guangdong, so the villagers doesn't have much power in the negotiation procedure, and they tended to accept the compensation in the land requisition compensation one time, but as sorry, I haven't seen my screen is shut. And next, I want to talk about the second point. Why is Foshan more complicated to the other cities in Guangdong provinces? Other cities in Guangdong province, it's because the, how do I say, the finance system in Foshan city, the local government in the town level and the village level has much more money than the county level. And here we have 4 districts. They have more money than the disposal public expenditure is much more there in town than in the district and in the prefecture of Foshan. And that's because Foshan is in 2003, it's merged from 5 counties into 1 city. But during that administrative reform, the financial system has not been changed. You see, we in the prefecture level, we can only spend like 50% of the whole city's money in the government line. And so when in the case of land expenditure, it's much depend on how the local town government and the villagers' negotiation result. And usually they will listen to the villagers' decisions because their work, how the town government's work get smoothly. They need the support from villagers very much. It depends on their supports. But as I know, it's quite similar in Zhongshan and Dongguan province, but in other in the Dongguan cities, but in other cities, the prefecture level government will be much powerful, and when they meet the needs to conduct the land requisition, the procedure will be much smoother. Okay, that's all for my answer.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your answer. I'm sorry, we cannot hear. Yes. Could you unmute your microphone?
Professor Sun raise the hand.
Could you unmute your microphone, please?
May I ask Professor Dr. Peng for another question? Thank you very much for a very interesting paper. I just have one question. You mentioned that this new mode of land acquisition, known as tract development, is promoted by the government to deal with the inefficient use of land and to promote urbanization. So I'm just wondering that what does it mean for those farmers? Are there any differences for them under this new mode of land acquisition? Will they be benefit more or benefit less under this mode? Thank you.
This is a very interesting question, and so far as I know, the new policy has not caused any changes to the villagers yet, because they, of course, they can get more compensation after the new land management law, which came effect in 2020, but it's not due to the tract development, but it's due to the law itself has restricted the compensation and increased the compensation level. But as to the policy of tract development, how does it affect the interests of the villagers? I think it means in the area away from urban area, like in the far away from areas, in the villages far away from the city, and they will not have the chance to, they will lose the chance to sell their land to the nation and to be used as a commercial or residential areas, residential or industry use. But on the other hand, the law is still has another reform direction. It encourages the collective owned land to enter the land market directly, but that reform is a extremely completed one, and related policy has not been very and the cities, many cities still have doubts about that policy, so it's still in trial phase, 就是试点阶段啊。Some cities are maybe take a little bit small step forward to try to implement that policy, but on the country level or in provincial level or even a state level, it is still a big question. When the collective owned land can officially enter the land market. Okay, thank you very much for your question, Professor Shen. Have I get the question answered?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.